What's up, Dragon Brood? We are hopping in today, catching up on more Phyrexia All Will Be One spoilers, or previews, I guess, more accurately. But this time we have quite a few to cover because we have basically from day 5 to day 8, I guess it is now. So there's going to be quite a few things to talk about, so let's waste no more time and go get right into them. Alright, starting at the top here, we have Nahiri's Sacrifice as a colorless and a red for a sorcery. As an additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice an artifact or creature with mana value X. Nahiri's Sacrifice deals X damage divided as you choose among any number of target creatures. Interesting, so you can sacrifice an artifact or a creature, and then whatever the cost is, you deal that much to any number of target creatures. This feels like it's pretty good for a limited. It is a sorcery, which is a little bit of a downside, but I don't hate it. I just don't think this has any real constructed play. I mean, there's just so many better removal right now that you would just play those over playing this. But it's at least an interesting idea for a card. But I think this is only going to be one of those things that are going to be some limited filler, but nothing for constructed. All right, Tainted Observer, colorless, green, blue for a 2/3. Phyrexian bird. I think all the creatures are Phyrexian at this point. But it does have flying, it's toxic 1, and when another creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay 2. If you do, proliferate. Like, okay, the problem I have with this card, I say problem, the card's actually pretty good. The fact that it's a flyer and has toxic is a real problem because it's already going to be hard to deal with. It almost becomes the priority thing to kill because you can at least block the other things on the ground. And you get to proliferate, so every time they play a creature, or it doesn't even say a creature, just when a creature enters the battlefield. So if you have a creature coming to play on your side, which could be just something that generates a token, by the way, they will be able to just pay 2, and then you can go ahead and give them another poison counter. So this card is really pretty good for those decks. Now, I don't know how many things in blue are going to actually have toxic, but even then, if you're just splashing it to play this, it's probably okay because we have plenty of lands to do that with. All right, we've got Vat of Rebirth. 1 black for an artifact. Whenever another artifact or creature you control is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, put an oil counter on this card. 2 and a black, tap it, remove 4 oil counters from it, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Activates only as a sorcery. This actually has some potential. Now, don't get me wrong, it's a little weird because you have to do a lot of setup, right? Like when stuff dies, you get to put oil counters on it, then you can move things. However, it doesn't say something like non-token creature. It just says whenever another artifact or creature goes to the graveyard. This could also be a 1 or 2 of, maybe even in sacrifice decks, because every time you're sacking something, you're putting oil counters on this. There's also other cards that care about how many other cards have oil counters or how many total oil counters are in play. So that could matter too. So I think depending on what type of build you have or if oil's important, this could be a big thing. But being able to just get cards right out of the graveyard and back into play for just the sake of some oil counters that are happening naturally anyway, it's kind of cool. I don't know how good it is, but it's at least an interesting card. Right, we have Dragonwing Glider, 3 colorless, red for an equipment. Has 4 Mirrodin, which basically makes a 2/2 rebel creature token that comes in equipped. And the equipped creature has +2/+2, haste, and flying. Equip of 3 red. So the equip is equal to its cost. This is kind of cool because it does give us a 4/4 flyer haste thing for 5 mana, right? That's pretty sad. It's basically a dragon for 5 mana, right? That's not bad. And then, of course, you can move this over to something else the next turn because you already have the mana for it because you paid this already. So I think this oddly could get some play. I don't want to go too crazy on it, but I think the problem right now, though, is we already have Draconic whatever. The other one that, like, you put on a creature, it gets flying, has fire breathing, and then if the creature dies, the enchantment goes back to your hand. I think that card doesn't see a lot of play as it is, so I'm not sure how much Dragonwing Glider gets played. However, Dragonwing Glider also comes with its own creature, and that's a pretty big deal. Now, this costs 2 mana more, but you do get a 2/2 with it that you could reuse the equipment as well. So I think this is better than the other one, but we'll see how much it gets played. It is 5 mana to do what you want to do, but this is probably one of the equipment so far that I looked at and said, okay, at least immediately I can think of some ideas for it. Now, I don't know if that means it's going to squeeze anything else out of those decks, because there's been a lot of new cards that are going to look really crazy going into some of these other builds. But this is at least one that's worth considering. Ichormoon Gauntlet. 2 colorless and a blue for an artifact. Planeswalkers you control. Oh, this just adds an ability. All right, so planeswalkers you control have 0 proliferate, or what is that? -12. Take an extra turn after this one. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, choose a counter on target permanent. Put an additional counter of that kind on that permanent. So it's like a targeted 1-card proliferate every time you play a non-creature spell. That's kind of cool. I mean, this card's kind of wild. Like, it encourages you to play more planeswalkers, obviously, and supports that. You get a free proliferate on any and all planeswalkers that you have, which is kind of cool. It also means that, let's say you have 3 planeswalkers out, and they could each proliferate to put an additional counter on the planeswalkers. So you could 0, put a counter on everything, 0, put a counter on everything, 0, put a counter on it. So at the end of the turn, your planeswalkers actually all went up 3 loyalty. Now, you'd still need stuff to block or protect them or whatever, but I don't know, maybe you have kill cards or spells or something. But this is something to really think about. And then anytime you play a spell, this is going to also let you move a counter up on one of those planeswalkers. So this card might be really powerful. Tekuthal, Inquiry Dominus. 2 colorless, blue for a 3/5, Phyrexian Horror. It has flying. If you would proliferate, you proliferate twice. Wow, okay. You can play 1 or blue Phyrexian twice. Remove 3 counters from among other artifacts, creatures, and planeswalkers you control. Put an indestructible counter on Tekuthal. Okay, this card's a little bit awkward, right? It's only, okay, first off, costed wise, it's costed to where you'll actually want to play it, right? It's 4 mana for a 3/5 flyer, which is pretty good, really. And then if you would proliferate for any reason, or like the card we just saw, then you get to do it a second time. So that's even crazier, right? If you play these last 2 cards together with planeswalkers out, you basically set all your planeswalkers to ultimate, which is crazy, but it's a thing. Right? And then in a pinch, you can just remove counters from things which you obviously juiced up because you've been proliferating, and just give this indestructible. Like, this card has to be playable. Now, admittedly, it doesn't go into every deck because not every deck's going to care about proliferate or even have tokens or counters or anything. But this is actually pretty good. Everyone's always looking for new red cards to include, so here we go. Exuberant Fuseling, 1 red for an 0/1. Has trample. It gets +1 for each oil counter on it. Whenever this enters the battlefield, or whenever another creature or artifact you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, put an oil counter on the Fuseling. This one's kind of interesting, right? Because you get a 1/1 for 1 with trample. Meh, not that exciting. But if you have something that's sending stuff to the graveyard regularly, well, now this thing's going to be a 2, 3, 4, and eventually just kills the opponent because it's going to trample for, some amount of mana. Also, it could be a world where you do something, get a bunch of tokens in the play, the other tokens die, this becomes really big. Plays well alongside the Devilish Valet, I think it is kind of interesting, right? Yeah, I don't know. It's not great, I will say, for a lot of the red decks, because it is just a 1/1. Ultimately for a couple of turns, so it's probably not the card those decks are looking for right off the rip, but you could also just be putting oil counters on it from other things you're already doing. If that's the case, then this card becomes much better, because then while you're doing other things, you're just putting more oil counters on it, and maybe even proliferating, so by turn 3 or 4, you're attacking with this like 4-power monster that your opponent obviously has to chump block, or else they're just going to eventually die to it. So I don't know. Interesting card, though. Infectious Bite. A colorless and a green for an instant. Target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature you don't control. Each opponent gets 1 poison counter. All right, so this card is a little bit messed up. It is a bite spell instead of a fight spell. And what we mean by that is bite is you have a creature, deal damage to another creature without putting yours at risk. Fight is my creature deals its power to the opposing creature deals its damage to my creature. So being a bite spell, this is already pretty nice. I like that a lot about this card. But just the random bonus of like, yeah, they just get a poison counter. Whatever. Right? So if you're already playing a poison deck, this is just like another removal you can kind of play and then take advantage of that. They're just like, cool, you got another counter and I got to kill a creature. And I'm probably attacking with stuff that has toxic on top of it, right? Because now you have one less blocker. So yeah, this card, while subtle, could be important to obviously a very particular deck. All right, the translation here says Phyrexian Champion. It's a 4 white, so white, 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 5/5, flying. If damage would be dealt to this card, prevent that damage. When damage is prevented this way, it deals that much damage to any other target. What the? Okay, hold on. Oh, hey, okay. Man, this is almost more annoying than the negator or the obliterator. All right. So you get now granted it's 4 white mana, but you get a 5/5 flyer. And then if any damage would be dealt to it, you prevent it. So this doesn't even matter if it's creature damage, burn spells, whatever. Then whatever damage it would take, you get to deal that damage to any other target, which could be the opponent, could be creatures, planeswalkers, whatever. Man, this card's bananas good. 4 mana, 5/5 for that. Like, oh my gosh. Like, even if you're just playing soldiers or something, you just play like 2 of these. Like, honestly, there's probably more scenarios where I'd rather have this than Myrel. Now, don't get me wrong, Myrel turning off some of your opponent's stuff is excellent. But, yeah, this is just a boss. And it's a 5/5 flyer on top of that, right? So, if your opponent has nothing, you just get aggressive and attack for 5. If they do have something, you're like, cool, I sit back. You're not going to attack me, right? Because I'm going to block with this and something else. And then whatever residual damage I'm going to use to kill your creature or kill you. So, yeah, this card's wild. And honestly, I feel like it kind of got pretty weak art compared to a lot of the other cards in the set for what it does. But, man, whew, yeah, I'd keep an eye out for this one. Furnace Punisher, 2 colors and a red for a 3/3 Phyrexian Warrior Menace. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, this card deals 2 damage to that player unless they control 2 or more basic lands. This one's kind of nice. All right, what I like about this is only 1 red in the cost, so it's easy to cast. So it's 3 total, but 1 red mana, right? So you can play this 3/3 for 3, which is average, not great. But then it does have Menace, which means it's hard to block, so that's awesome. But there are a lot of decks playing a lot of non-basics. And unless they have 2 non-basics in play, this just punishes them straight up. Or 2 basics, I should say, sorry. So, yeah, I don't know. This is... I want to say this is playable, right? But I'm thinking about the other things that 3 mana decks are trying to do right now. Like, would you rather have this more often than, say, Reckless Stormseeker in a lot of red decks, right? I think that's going to be the debate. But if the environment is in a way, like, let's say you're playing against a bunch of mono blue, mono black, whatever. Okay, this card's going to be pretty bad because they're going to have plenty of basics, right? But if we move into a world where there's a lot of 3 and 4 color decks, then this card becomes a superstar because it's just going to be guaranteed 2 damage every turn, and that's if you don't have multiples. So this is one of those cards that's going to probably be metagame dependent, but isn't terrible even in the wrong metagames. Atraxa Skitterfang, 3 colorless, 2/2 for Phyrexian Insect, enters the battlefield with 3 oil counters on it. At the beginning of combat on your turn, you may remove an oil counter from this card. When you do, target creature you control gains your choice of flying, vigilance, death touch, or lifelink till end of turn. This is kind of okay, but what I like about it is it fits very well into the various artifact decks, right? Any of the aggressive artifact creature decks, this is the type of card they would want. 1, because it's an artifact, obviously, it comes into play as a 2/2, but it gives the option of giving something flying, or death touch, or lifelink. Vigilance you'll probably rarely use, but being able to get that big, where the creature you've grown over a couple turns over the top with flying is pretty cool. This kind of doubles alongside the Steel Seraph as well. I think this works well with that, because now you have 2 cards that can give you all those different options in the deck, both in the 3 mana slot for the most part. So that's pretty cool too. So yeah, I like the flexibility of this card. Again, I think it only fits in a handful of decks, but I think the ones that want it will actually really enjoy it. The Mycosynth Gardens. It's a land that's a sphere. We've seen sphere reference on other cards. Taps adds for colorless, pay 1 and tap it, add a mana of any color. Or you can pay X and tap it, and then this card becomes a copy of target non-token artifact you control with mana value X. So this is kind of interesting. You know, like we've seen a couple of cards today already that are artifacts that this could copy, which would be pretty powerful. Yeah, this is just an interesting card. I don't know what I would even do with it right now. This might be a card that's better for older formats, but it is just cool that it even exists. This is a very neatly designed card where you look at it and say, I'm sure I can do something with this, but I don't know what yet, right? But you know there's going to be a thing somewhere along the line where this card's going to be pretty cool. Right, we have Incubation Sac. It's a 1 green, enters the battlefield with an oil counter on it. You can pay for remove an oil counter from it. Create a 3/3 colorless Phyrexian Golem artifact creature token. Activate as a sorcery. That's actually not that bad. I was expecting the words on this to be worse as I was reading along. All right, so it enters the battlefield with 3 oil counters on it. And then the next turn you can pay 4, make it 3/3, pay 4, make it 3/3. You know, this is one of those cards that, like, I don't think it's great. But if I'm already playing a green deck with oil as a side project in the deck or some cohesive synergy, then I think this card is fine. The only downside is that it does say you have to activate it as a sorcery. So I'd have to be able to get a significant amount of mana so I could both pay 4 to make a 3/3 and be able to respond, whether that's kill a thing, counter a thing, whatever, during my opponent's turn. But if you can, and you're so worried about proliferate and oil counters and whatever, this card could be okay. All right, so at this point, we're starting to see the majority of the set come together, and it's looking pretty good. I think there's a lot to be said for Toxic. I think there's a lot to be said for Proliferate. I think some of the green-based aggro decks got some bonuses. A couple of really sick white cards we've seen already so far. There's stuff to help Planeswalkers that we got previewed today. So it's just like, this is one of those sets that I'm starting to feel like every strategy, regardless of what your favorite type of strategy is actually going to get some type of boost here, which is good. I think across the board, I think every deck type gets something. Hell, even Mono Black got Phyrexian Obliterator, right? So now I don't know if any of those cards are outright better than some of the other options we have now, but I like the fact that there are options. So if you want to build a different style of one of your favorite decks or something that's more catered to you and your playstyle, that's probably going to be an option in this set. So yeah, I'm actually kind of looking forward to it. But I want to say, if you want to get caught up on the previews, I do have other videos, so I'm going to link the last one here so you can get caught up to speed and know what's going on with all the stuff we've been referencing.